Hello and welcome back to the show. I felt that it was high time that we dived into some nitty-gritty content, particularly around the numbers and knowing your numbers. After all, this is a show all about becoming wealthy, not just in the financial sense, but when we are talking about numbers and becoming wealthy in a financial sense, then it is really important to know and understand and be able to navigate your way around this particular topic really well. Now, it's a real bugbear of mine, I have to say, that we don't get taught this stuff at school. Well, certainly not in the comprehensive system that I was brought up in, and therefore this information is not typically known outside of wealthy families, maybe some private schools or other, places where people get educated in a different way, maybe business schools, etc. And so therefore the rest of us are pretty much left to get on with it, either work for other people or have to learn as we go along about how business works, how investments work, and how making money actually works. Anyway, I digress on that point. So I'm going to be running a series of 5 to 6 shows detailing the differences between these different financial terminologies, which I see as absolutely crucial to you taking ownership, being more empowered and taking responsibility for your own money, and to understand what people are talking about when they're talking at you about return on investment or yield or true rate of return or whatever it's going to be. So we're going to be diving into those topics over this series. Okay, so like I say, because we don't get taught this stuff typically, it really never ceases to amaze me how few people really know about this topic. And when it comes to investing and working with your money and finances, and this being such an important decision to make with your hard-earned cash, that we don't actually necessarily take the time, or it's like low down on the list of priorities, perhaps because we're so busy, to learn to or to comprehend what this is all about, or worse still, actually give our power over to somebody else to tell us what the best decisions are for us and our money. So this is what we're all about in the Freedom Club, helping people to really discover or rediscover what it actually means to take ownership and to become empowered and take responsibility over what happens to our money. And because we don't get taught these types of processes either by schools or necessarily our parents, it's absolutely crucial that you do learn and refine this part of your knowledge until you know it inside out if you are serious about becoming wealthy in the financial sense. Okay. Now, there is a caveat to this. I'm not a financial advisor. Okay, I'm a financial educator. So everything I talk about here is just my opinion, my knowledge, my wisdom, the things that I've learnt over the course of the last 25 to 30 years or so. Okay, so do not take it as financial advice. That's one thing I wanted to say. What we're going to talk about today is the simplest form, the simplest terminology that you probably do know, hopefully you know, and it's called return on investment. We're also going to dip into return on time invested as well as the first two things in this part of the equation. So an ROI, or return on investment, is the amount of money you'll be making on any money that you put into an investment or financial vehicle. Okay, it's exactly the same principle as if you put money into a savings account, for example, and you receive interest on that money that you've deposited into that account. So it's a really basic calculation and it makes for a great starting point. So for example, if you were to have £10,000 to put into a high interest bank account. In the UK here at the moment, when this episode is being broadcast, the highest rate of interest you're going to achieve really in a UK bank account is about 5.5%. Maybe you might eke a little bit more than that if you've been a customer over a long time, but let's say easy access, about 5.5%. So this means if you deposited £10,000 into your account, it will return you £550 a year, which equates to £45.80 per month. It's not too bad. It's certainly not going to set your world on fire. And actually these days it's not keeping up even with inflation or the debasement of currency, which is what I've spoken about in a previous episode. So you might want to consider, another kind of vehicle or other kinds of vehicles where your money can grow faster and work harder for you. There are plenty of other investment vehicle types which can produce much higher returns, but you do need to know what you're doing and you do need to understand what you're getting yourself into. But this is not the call for that. So what we're talking about here is if you were able to generate more like 12% a year or 15 or even 20% a year return on investment, ROI, then obviously this is much better. Because if you were able to do that, then your £10,000 could generate £1,200 at 12% or £1,500 at 15% or £2,000 a year at 20%, which equates to proportionately £100 a month at the lowest level, £125 a month or £167 a month. So that's getting somewhere. That's starting to make you feel, okay, my money's working for me. It's actually growing now. I'm actually seeing the benefits of the cash that I've locked away in there and what it's actually generating for me. Obviously, you have to consider tax as well, and this is going to be different for each person. So I'm not going to go into that now. And I'm not a tax advisor, but it's something you need to take into account. But obviously, as you grow your investment portfolio, meaning that you have different amounts of money in different places over the course of time, and you can start with the smallest of sums. So don't even worry if you don't have £10,000, because let's face it, I mean, how many people do actually have 10,000 at their fingertips these days? Not many. So, but you can start with even smaller amounts, £20 a month, £25 a month, £50 a month, that type of thing, and work with the principle of compounding. Again, something I've discussed on a previous episode. Then it's amazing how powerfully this can work for you over the course of time, especially when you're maximizing your ROI. Now, to give you an example, one of my favorite topics, as you know, is property, and it's one of my favorite investment types. And I'm going to give you a very basic example about how this principle works with property, but at least gives you a starting point before I delve into more detail on the property front in upcoming episodes. So if you were to buy a property for £100,000, which is a pretty cheap property these days, and you received £600 a month in rent, and that equates to £7,200 a year, then you'd be receiving a return of 7.2%. And the way that you work this out is you divide the annual rent, which is £7,200, you divide that by the property value, that being £100,000, and that will equal 0.072. You then multiply that by 100, and that's how you get your percentage, the 7.2. So you do 0.072 multiplied by 100 equals 7.2% ROI. All right, if you put £100,000 into a bank account receiving your 5.5% interest, then you'd be receiving £5,500 a year. It's a crude example, I know, and there are obviously costs on top when you run a property as well, and there are taxes, etc., etc. But I'm just wanting to explain to you the basic principles of how these numbers work, how the machinations of numerology works in terms of investments. Okay. Now, one factor that people tend to miss out of the equation when they're considering investment opportunities or putting their time and energy into investments is the equation about the return on the time that they invest into completing a deal or researching a particular form of investment. And this is known as ROTI, return on time invested. Okay, so for example, if you've spent 30 hours of your own time into putting a property deal together, let's say, and you value your time, then you must factor an hourly cost into the equation when it comes to the costs and the expenses that you've had on that particular deal, which again we'll go into more detail on in future episodes. So let's say that your time for you is worth £20 an hour. Then basically at 30 hours of your time, you've basically put an extra £600 into, in terms of time and effort, into the deal. So this has to really go on the bottom line of your figures in terms of your own time being involved. If you, however, value your time at £50 an hour, then obviously that equates to £1,500, a significant difference. And this can also help you make decisions and understand about where your time is best employed. Are you best off doing this deal yourself, or perhaps you could employ somebody else for doing certain aspects of it? I remember in the early days, myself and my husband, we used to spend time after we'd bought a property, going down, sleeping on airbeds, painting and decorating the next the day after we'd completed to get the flat up and running, and cleaning and sort of titivating the property to get it ready to let. And I look back on those days very fondly, and actually if I look back now, I was earning quite well as a music teacher as an hourly rate, but I had limited numbers of hours that I was working. So I did have the time to go and do it. And we would have had to pay a decorator pretty handsomely to go over there and actually decorate the property. So it was kind of worth our time. But if we'd been earning six-figure salaries in the city, absolutely wouldn't have been worth our time. We would have employed a decorator to go there and do that for us, and a cleaning lady, and etc. But actually we really enjoyed it. It was half the fun of setting up our business, was having a little adventures and going and getting properties ready to be really lovely homes for people to live in. So anyway, I digress again. So looking at the time that you've spent on a property deal, or putting something like this together is super important as well. Another way of looking at it is that, for example, if you have done a property deal, and let's say that you've made a total of £20,000 profit, you've bought a property, you've spent a lot of time kind of putting your time and effort into making this deal happen, you've made £20,000 profit, and let's say it's cost you 40 hours of your time. And so the free and clear profit gets divided by 40, because that's the amount of hours that you've put in terms of putting it together and finalise it. Basically, that means that 20,000 gets divided by 40, and you've made £500 an hour. Not too bad, hey? Wouldn't it be nice to know how to do that? I wonder. Anyway, I thought that would be a bit of a fun intro to the numbers. And of course, if you want to know more, or you want to get involved and learn more of this stuff, I've put together a really comprehensive property course. We've also got a fantastic kind of money and finance course, and of course our Freedom Club, where we discuss this type of thing on a regular basis. Then please feel free to visit us at the-freedom-club.com. Make sure you're there on the next episode to learn the next bit about the numbers.